Hi, this is Murphy. This is my channel, Murphy's Every Whim, and I am here to talk about books because I love to talk about books and I don't really have anybody to talk to them with except you. So here I am. I'm in, it's afternoon, as it always is when I'm videoing. I'm in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. HWC, that's short for He Who Caters to My Every Whim, or He Who Caters to Murphy's Every Whim. HWC loves to play golf, golfs all the time, and he likes to use old-style hickory-shafted clubs, and he's playing in a tournament here in Sheboygan. It's a 3-day tournament, and so I'm in a hotel. I spend a lot of time in hotels, and I want to talk about the books I've read lately. So I have a book blog, and I got behind a lot. And you know, when you're behind about writing about your books, and you're behind by over 100 books, it becomes daunting. And so I convinced myself to just forget that and start writing about books again. But the problem is I still got behind because I'm thinking about, talking about, and writing about books more often. I'm more interested in reading books. And so I've been finishing more than one book a day. Now, that's partly because the books I'm reading, some of them have been pretty short. But if I only feel like writing one blog a day, then I still get behind. So I'm behind. I was hoping to catch up. But I thought I'd talk about the books I've read in the past couple of weeks. I think this goes back maybe a month, but we'll see. And so I'm in a hotel. I don't really have any writing implements. I'm recording with my iPad. And so I needed to take notes on something. So I took notes on the inside of a cardboard box. All right, I'm going to start first with the audiobooks I have listened to. Some of these I've been listening to for a long time, meaning I start and stop them. I talked about this in a previous post that sometimes I think of the books I read and listen to as like TV series. I might be watching a TV series and have to wait months before the next episode comes out. That's not as true as much in the days of now that we can stream whole seasons at a time, or whole series even. But for the books, sometimes I set them aside and come back to them. And so, anyway, so here are the books. One that I finished recently that it's not, you know, right up there at the top of my list, but I really wanted to know how it was going to turn out, was The Arrest by Jonathan Lethem. And I will mispronounce names. That's just the way it's going to go. Jonathan Lethem wrote this, or published this in 2020. And it's a post-apocalyptic story, but it's really a commentary on post-apocalyptic stories. And I can't admit to understanding all the nuances and all the literary and movie and TV references in it. But the arrest mentioned in the title is that machinery stops. And so a TV writer, movie writer, happened to be at his sister's locavore farm when this happened. But it turns out that his partner, his writing partner, obtained some crazy nuclear-powered supercar and comes and stays with them. And so it's partly about the village they live in, the relationships and, like I said, a commentary on this type of book. Being in a hotel, I don't really have that much control over noise, and I don't know how this is coming through, but they're vacuuming outside in the hall right now. Another one I finished lately, which I listened to probably maybe 2.5 times, was Women Talking, the book by, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing this, Miriam Toews. And I just loved listening to this book. Not just the story, the rhythm of the words, but the narrator, and I'm sorry I don't have his name written down. And it might seem funny that a book about women talking, which is actually a story about the aftermath of a decades-long series of sexual assault in a secluded Mennonite village in Bolivia. You would think that would be written by a woman, or read, it was written by a woman, but read by a woman. The narrator would be a woman, but the frame of the story is that August Epps, the school teacher, is taking minutes of the meetings where the women are meeting to discuss whether they're going to leave their village or stay and forgive the men who have sexually assaulted them. And so August Epps is writing this because he can write minutes. The women can't read. And so it's just a lovely book about relationships and resilience and faith and wanting your voice to be heard. Beautiful book. I am sure I will listen to it again soon. A Gentleman in Moscow. I first checked this out from my local library as an audio file on Libby back in 2021 and have read it, listened to it multiple times over that, and I finally sat down and listened to the rest of it. Gentleman in Moscow is at first I thought it was going to be about politics and espionage and that sort of thing, but it ends up being a lovely story of a man from, I believe, the age 33 to 65, so a 32-year length of the life of this man who was an aristocrat and in the Bolshevik Revolution was charged with being a social parasite and ironically given house arrest in the Metropole, in the Hotel Metropole in Moscow. So effectively they forced him to be a social parasite. Anyway, so this man has to move from his rooms in the Metropole to 100 square foot servants' quarters in the attic, but he makes do, and it's the story of his life, the women and men in his life, in this narrow scope of the Hotel Metropole. And he has to get a job because while he's staying there, either the hotel or the government's paying for him staying there, they're not paying for clothes and food and those sorts of things. So he has to get a job. So he becomes a waiter in the fine dining restaurant in the Metropole. And over time, he develops relationships and builds a family in the Metropole. And it's a lovely book. I recommended it to my sister. She read it. She said she loved it. And we have differing reading tastes, although there's some overlap. And this was written in 2016, so it's a fairly new book, but lovely book. If you liked, I would say if you liked reading John Irving, you'll love this book by Amor Towles. A book recommended to me, or recommended not personally to me, but by Criminale on his channel, was Horrorstor by Grady Hendrix, which was written in 2014. This is a horror comedy book. I don't read much horror, and I keep trying horror to see whether I would read some more. And I would have to say this fits in with the type of horror that I would read, and that's horror comedy. And it's set in a store which is modeled after IKEA, but it's clearly an IKEA knockoff. And sadly, the store was built over a site that caused it to be infested with ghosts. And so the story is about the employees who decide to face these ghosts. So very funny. It was written in 2014. Another thing that I got from Criminale's website, or from Criminale's YouTube channel, BookTube channel, was a project that he had been a part of where you read books from the year of your birth. And so I listened to Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote, which was written in 1958, the year of my birth. Sorry, I know, you now know how old I am. And I had read this book before on paper, but I listened to it this time, and the reading was good. And I had forgotten that it was set during World War II. It's not set in 1958, and so it doesn't satisfy one of the reasons why Criminale was part of that project to read books from your birth year, in that it tells the story of what was going on when you were born, but it did tell the story of what was going on when my parents were in high school. So but I love Breakfast at Tiffany's, the book. The movie is nice as well, but kind of whitewashes a lot of the issues that aren't whitewashed in the book. All right, moving on to Kindle books. I finished the book 3 of the Game trilogy by Anders de la Motte, and that last book was Bubble. This is it says it's a crime trilogy, and yes, there is crime being committed by one half of a family, while the other half are members of the police and a member of security. So there's these brother and sister, HP, that's the letters HP, and Rebecca, and they their father was a mysterious man in some ways. They didn't actually realize how mysterious he was. And in this book, we learn about their father's background. This book focuses, I would say, half and half on HP and Rebecca, whereas the first book in the trilogy Game focused mostly on HP and had some Rebecca in it. The second book also focused on HP and had some Rebecca in it, but this one had more Rebecca, and I like that about it. So HP gets wrapped up in a game that it causes him to commit violence, and in this book we find out more about the game. He has his last task to do, and Rebecca is struggling to understand what's going on with HP, and so on. So there's a lot of violence, a lot of paranoia. Nothing HP does is as it seems, and sometimes what Rebecca does isn't what it seems. They don't know what's going on. They don't know who's pulling strings, etc. So that was on my Kindle. I've had that on my Kindle for a long time. It was written in 2012. I also read Genderqueer. I read a lot of graphic novels. This was really a graphic memoir. It's by Maia Kobabe. And I got this because I just got a new Kindle, an actual Kindle paper. I got a Kindle Paperwhite. And along with that, I got 3 months of Kindle Unlimited. So I went out and did some research about what were good books on Kindle Unlimited, and Genderqueer was one of them. In Kindle Unlimited, it says it's a 2-part, but really it's the same graphic memoir twice, but the second one is a later edition and has more information in it. So it has a foreword and an afterword, and then it also has some preliminary artwork by Kobabe. And so I recommend just getting the second one. It's not really 2 parts, not part 1, part 2, although that's the way Kindle Unlimited makes it seem. I wish I'd known about this book. Well, actually, it was published in 2019, so I wouldn't have had it. But when I had a graphic novel class that talked about identity and representation, that would have been a good book for me to use in that class. Another book that I got on Kindle Unlimited, well, I got it on Kindle, but I don't remember exactly how I got it. But anyway, the book is Golf in the Year 2000, written in 1892 by J. McCollough, and that's the letter J. It's not clear what his first name is. He's only known for 2 books, this one and a book on playing golf. And this is not the J. McCollough who writes survival skills books and army skills books. This is a Scottish golfer from the 19th century. And it's about what golf will be like in the 2000s, in 2000. And so this guy goes to sleep and wakes up. He had been in a coma for 108 years. And he wakes up, and in the society he wakes up in the year 2000, all men play golf. That's all they do. And the women run the companies, do the work, etc. And it's partly social commentary and partly about what golf would be like in the year 2000. And so I discussed some of the questions that came up in there about, you know, how golf would be played. And my husband says that some of the things it talked about really came true, like clubs that keep track of your score for you. It says it was published in the year 2009, but I think that's when the Kindle version was published, and I tried to make sure this was really written in 1898, and as far as I can tell, it is. All right, so physical books. I got The Boxcar Children by Gertrude Chandler Warner. Gertrude Chandler Warner. I got The Boxcar Children by mistake. I was trying to get The Railway Children, and I got this by mistake, but I decided to read this. And because I read this, I ended up going in my own library. I'm trying to reproduce the library that I had when I was a kid. And I pulled out 2 other books, Baked Beans for Breakfast by Ruth Chu and Children in Hiding by Charlene Joy Talbot. And the Baked Beans for Breakfast and Children in Hiding books were written, Children in Hiding in 1966 as Tomas Takes Charge, and Baked Beans for Breakfast in 1970. I got those as part of the Scholastic Book Services when I was in school. And The Boxcar Children was written earlier. I don't remember. Let me look it up. 1942. It was first published in 1942. It then became a series of 160 books, which I think weren't all written by Gertrude, Chandler, Warner. So all three of these books are about children who run away or are abandoned and trying to make their way in the world on their own, and different situations. Boxcar Children is probably written for grades 2 to 6, and the other two are written for grades 4 to 8. And these are beloved books from my childhood, and if you want to buy these right now, they're going to run you somewhere between $20 and $30. And these are the actual books from my library from when I was a kid. The Children in Hiding book actually has some Spanish in it, and I read that probably in the 4th, 5th, or 6th grade, and I don't remember what my response to the Spanish was at that time, because now when I read it, I know what all the Spanish is saying. So I wish I could remember what I was thinking back then about having a language. Another book that I got, I'd always wanted a Simenon book, and this one's The Hatter's Phantoms, and this is not a Magritte book, if that's the correct pronunciation. It's a standalone, and it was dark and interesting, very psychological rather than, say, a police procedural. And I'd gotten it because I'd heard of Simenon, and it's the sort of book that I think would have been on the shelves of people that I know who are writers. The last book on this list that I'm going to show you is Hell Eternal. It's a graphic novel. Forgotten how many pages. It's not that long. 50 some odd, no, 64 pages long. And it's by Jamie Delano and Sean Phillips and Matt Hollingsworth. And it's a standalone. It's almost a floppy, but it's a standalone. And it is dark. It is way, way dark. This goth woman who's a lesbian falls in love with a woman who's probably bisexual, and both of them get wrapped up in a group of white supremacists. And she's kissing her Ruger on the front here. And it's not because she's going to go out and do any violence towards people who aren't white. She struggles with the fact that she's gotten involved with these white supremacists. And so it's dark. I really can't talk about it much more than that. But it's interesting, and I keep thinking about it. I keep thinking about people who get wrapped up in these sorts of things. All right, so that's a list of books I've read in the last month or so, and some I've written blog posts on and some I haven't. And you can tell I have very broad reading habits, all the way from children's books to graphic novels. But so now I'm off to write some blog posts, and hopefully I can get caught up. And because I keep saying I can't read more until I finish my blog post, but that hasn't stopped me. I'm still reading. All right. Thanks for letting me talk to you about books. This is a great outlet for me, and I will see you next time. Take care.